No matter how you move, get it done. No matter how you move, get it done. No matter how you move, get it done. No matter how you move, get it done.
So the 7 deadly sins: Meliodas, Bon, King, Diane, Merlin, Escanor, Golder. Wow, people, I can't even believe we're here. It has been so many years since I've done a full-on video talking about the 7 deadly sins, and what I'm here today to do is talk about the 7 deadly sins for the final time, because it's been a little bit now since the finale of the 7 deadly sins. The manga wrapped up some time ago, and the anime finally recently aired its finale, including the last film that wrapped up the entirety of the original 7 deadly sins. Now there's more story to come technically, because Netflix has those original films that is going to take place in between the 7 deadly sins and the sequel spin-off for Knights of the Apocalypse. But yeah, those are terrible looking 3D CG, and yeah, it's not the original. Like, this is the original story, Nakaba Suzuki's original ideas, and the rest of that is just like an afterthought. This is truly the 7 deadly sins, its beginning, middle, and finale. And I'm here today to just kind of go down the row of my overall personal thoughts. I mean, let's not even beat around the bush. If you've seen the 7 deadly sins, then you know what I'm talking about throughout the years, the rise and fall of it. And we talked a little bit about this on a segment of a show that I do called Forever News. In case you didn't watch it, you should be watching, my lord. But essentially, it had one hell of a rise and one hell of a fall in terms of quality, art, animation, and the sales followed to reflect just how bad of a fall it had. Because with season 1 of the 7 deadly sins, I'll never forget, because I started the series around like 2012ish, if I'm not mistaken, and the manga was crazy, it was fire. Then 2014, we got the first season of the anime, A1 Pictures, and while it wasn't 100% faithful, it was about 98-99% faithful to the actual manga. It adapted the first 100 chapters. It was a freaking bang for your buck. Honestly, it felt like the original creator, Nakaba Suzuki, possibly intended to actually end the series right there, because it was straight up an adaptation with the 24 episodes of 100 chapters, the entirety of the first arc, when we were going up against good old Hendy Boy and what seemingly was majority of the story. And it was probably, in my opinion, something along the lines of, hey, this series is blowing up, it's doing amazing, we can't let it end this way. Because in that first season, that first run, that first arc, we see 6 of the 7 deadly sins, and I wouldn't be surprised if Nakaba Suzuki was going to introduce all of them, and then at the last minute, when he had 6 of them already on the board, they were like, wait a minute, yo, what are you doing? You're playing with our money right now, you better stop, hold, don't show that last sin yet. That's for next season, because we milking this, baby, we getting money. That's probably a little bit of an exaggerated version of what ultimately happened, because yeah, we seen almost all of the sins in the first season minus 1. But again, nevertheless, art and animation, beautiful. I'll never forget the first time we saw people like Gil Thunder and how he threw that spear at Meliodas, and everything just looked phenomenal. I knew we had something special there. In fact, I want to say that was around the time towards the end of 2014 where we had series like My Hero Academia starting up, and I remember even Champion going into like 2015, 2016 and saying, yo, okay, if these are the new dogs in next generation of manga, 7 deadly sins, My Hero, etc., I'm rooting for 7 deadly sins. I love this shit. It feels like it's a serious at times. Obviously, it still has goofy stuff, but it's almost like fairy tale done right at the time is what a lot of people branded it, because it was just like, it has all of those elements that you love from fairy tale, but it didn't have a lot of the BS and, you know, the power scaling issues and all of that jazz until later on down the road, that is. But it was, in the beginning, in its infancy, beautiful, man. I just have almost no complaints about season 1. The music was great, the opening was great, the visuals was great, the story was great, the adaptation was great. Again, it was missing small things like King's dog, I guess should have been more in there or something like that, but nothing out of this world. It was just damn near a perfect adaptation almost. And it wasn't until we got to the 10 Commandments season 2 where we started seeing the first inklings, at the very least, the small foibles of where we were actually headed and the downward spiral we were going to. Because season 2 definitely wasn't of the same quality as season 1. The art and animation had taken a slight dip. The 10 Commandments, while in their initial appearance looked pretty damn cool, it was clear that the same A-team that was used, or the same love and passion that was used for the first season, wasn't quite at the peak that it was with season 1. It just didn't have that that same stellar stuff. A lot of times, especially like towards the end, I remember of season 2, Escanor's big triumphant moment. I was like, oh, okay, you know, it didn't look as great as it should have been. And I believe it was when Escanor went up against Estarossa. That battle, it didn't look quite as good as it was supposed to look. And again, we're talking season 2, but still, season 2 was pretty damn good. I loved it. I'll never forget the chapters because I used to review the manga. All of the commandments from Derriere, that I loved her initial character design. I hated it when Nakaba Suzuki cut off her hair. I was like, oh, it looks so good. Why did we have a character redesign? I'd imagine it's because the long hair was a little difficult to draw and animate or whatever, but from Derriere to Droll from the Giants, Estarossa, the brother of the, you know, Meliodas and Zeldris, another one of the brothers that when I first saw him, I was like, oh shit, so he's kind of like, I guess, a evil demon version of Meliodas, right? Even though Meliodas, you know, early on we started finding out he's related to the Demon Clan in some form. Frodrin, okay, I ain't gonna hype up Frodrin. Like, out of all of the 10 commandments, Frodrin was, no. Galland, oh my god, I'll never forget the battle, the fight for survival. That was one of my favorite moments in the early stuff of the 10 commandments, when he was fighting and Bond was trying to run for his life, and then that's when they ran into him. We got the big introduction to one of the best and most iconic characters of the entirety of this freaking story. I was like, oh my god, Escanor, praise the sun. Galland really, he was one of the ones that showcased, okay, these people are a threat. Like, we got power levels started being introduced, and in general, he was strong as hell. He showed that if he's not even at the top of the totem pole when it comes to the 10 commandments, and he's doing this type of damage, we're in trouble. Gloxinia, who along with Droll from the Giants was a big plot twist in and of itself later on down the road. Grey Road, nothing big. Melascula was pretty dope as well. Monspiet, very big and vital, along with Derriere and his relationship with Derriere. But just in general, man, the 10 commandments, when they were introduced, and for the longest time, they were freaking epic. And I loved the way we were going with things. We had the big plot twist that one of the former knights was the one that summoned them, and it was like, yo, we just went from Hendy Boy to now we're going up against these 10 demons, Demon Clan. Oh my god, this is crazy. And it was an interesting direction. And again, the first 2 seasons looked great, were great. Season 2 was a dip, but still not as bad as you would, you know, expect. And it's like, oh shit, we good to go. A lot of epic stuff. Animation ain't at what it needs to be, but it's still freaking awesome. Now we got all 7 of the 7 deadly sins on screen in action. Let's do the damn thing. Then following that is where we started seeing the dip. I want to say we had like some OVAs in between. It was either before season 2 or after season 2. I forget. We got like those 4 OVAs that Netflix decided to say, it's season 2, guys, to basically clickbait people into actually watching them. And then you find out, oh, they're OVA fillers. I mean, they were written by the author, but you don't really need to have watched them, I guess you could say. But then we got the big shocker that kind of honestly was the death blow, and it was completely downhill from there when we found out that A1 Pictures was no longer going to be animating the 7 Deadly Sins following a film. I believe it was Prisoners of the Sky. When that film flopped, that was it. A1 Pictures didn't want anything to do with it anymore, and ultimately passed the baton to somebody a studio that I'm still kind of like baffled as to why they got involved to begin with. Studio Dean. Studio Dean took up the mantle of doing the 7 Deadly Sins, and it was a train wreck from there. The art and animation was never the same again. We never recovered, fam. We never went through it. And I also find that my conspiracy brain a little interesting that once we find out the big plot twist, which in case you don't know, we're spoiling a lot of stuff through here. I just gotta be honest with you. When we find out that essentially the Goddess Clan are technically like the real villains, because a lot of the stuff, the messed up shit that they've done to the demons, once we found out they were the bad guys, all of a sudden the franchise went, yeah, you're not hearing about 7 Deadly Sins that much anymore, which I thought was really interesting, because again, we're going up against the Demon Clan. You're like, oh shit, they're horrible, which they were. Like, Galland was terrible, you know, he was evil. A lot of them, they did some messed up things and whatnot. But then when you find out why and what really led them into it, and how the Goddess Clans are the ones that really started this big massive war, then you're like, oh shit, this is crazy. Plot twist on plot twist. And I loved it. I loved a lot of what they did with the angels. And then one of my personal favorite moments, which that's something that 7 Deadly Sins was very close to Fairy Tail in terms of, with actually diving into the romance and not leaving it like what some of the other shonens from, like, you know, different publishers would do, like Naruto and Bleach, where, oh, you gotta wait till the end of the series to find out who ends up with who. No, 7 Deadly Sins, it dove into it right away. Meliodas really wants to be with Elizabeth. Bond really wants to be, even though I always found that creepy and gross, and I still find it creepy and gross, to be honest with you. That's kind of what ruined that whole thing with Bond, because Bond used to be my dude. after a while I was like, okay, it's gross already, him and Elaine. But you know, the pairings was never shied away from. King and Deanne, it was there, it was right there, and it was like, okay, I respect it. Like, Nakaba Suzuki doesn't shy away from it. This is something that he does. Down to even people like Zeldris and, you know, a demon and whatnot. It was cool. But still, Bon and Elaine. I mean, for crying out loud, even over time, we started to see more of Escanor x Merlin, or at the very least, Escanor wanting Merlin once we get more into his backstory. And I'd probably have to say, and I'm sure it's a cliche because a lot of people will agree with me, but Escanor was one of the best of the Seven Deadly Sins and one of my favorite characters of the Seven Deadly Sins. Again, early on it was Bon. Once we started diving too far into the Elaine stuff and just in general as the story progressed, Bon was still cool, but it was like, yo, I gotta roll with my guy Escanor. The way he, spoiler alert by the way, spoiler alert, 3, 2, 1, make some noise. Escanor's death, which is one of the, you know, that's the biggest death of the series, one of the actual 7 deadly sins. His death and his kiss to Merlin as he goes and finding out how, you know, he used to rage because he couldn't control his powers, and it was Meliodas and the sins that made him feel welcomed and accepted, and not just this absolute monster that couldn't control himself and his pride would get in the way and stuff like that. I loved Escanor. Escanor was freaking awesome. Like, as things morphed, like, my favorite sins started moving around a little bit. Like, again, initially it was Bon, then for a little bit I was rocking with King very heavy, and Deanne with the whole giant stuff. I was never really a Golder fan, to be honest with you. Golder's kind of like, okay, but the twists with the real Golder from back in the days and all that, oh my god, I love that. That shit was freaking awesome as well. I know I'm just fanboying out, but you know, we're kind of just going through the roads of a lot of things that unfortunately I didn't get to talk about because I had stopped talking about Sins. I want to say last time I talked about the Sins manga was in the manga, actually, not in the anime, was way back in like 2017 when Meliodas and Escanor went to fight. You know, that legendary disgusting looking animation that floated around and went viral and stuff like that. That scene in the manga was amazing. That was the last time I talked about it. So we just got so many different things flying through my mind right now as we're talking. I also found it crazy interesting that eventually Bon, you know, because of what he wanted to do with Elaine, he used his immortality and gave that energy, that power, so to speak, to basically bring Elaine back to life, because that was a struggle. Again, I always found it real creepy, like, why is Bon rolling around with a lowly? I get it, she's been around for hundreds of years, she still looks like a lowly. It was, and I know you're probably like, Fennell, why are you harping on it? Because it's gross. But one of my favorite pairings of the whole thing that honestly I was just talking about a little bit ago, but I didn't really dive in, is Meliodas x Elizabeth and the curses that was put on them for, what was it, the 3,000 years that Meliodas has been alive. Bro, that shit had me in tears when I first read it, when I first experienced it. And then as we kept on going and I really dove into the anime, seeing how basically Meliodas had to keep on witnessing over and over and over Elizabeth die after her powers would activate 3 days later. And he tried everything. He tried to keep it until she was old. He tried so many different routes, and it always led to the same thing of Elizabeth dying. It hit me very powerful. And then when I had a similar thing happen to me in real life, I was like, oh shit, you know, when you go back and, you know, because anime, you could always run to anime when you have life problems. You could always run to manga when you have life problems. It's one of the most beautiful escapes. And then, you know, I kind of could sympathize even more with what Meliodas went through, having to experience the love of his life die in his arms. You know, it was very, very impactful. And never forget when I first experienced it, I was like, this is dope stuff, man. This is powerful. You know, this is really good writing in the midst of this giant story with the 10 Commandments, the Goddess Clan, the 7 Deadly Sins, all of this fantastical stuff, the giants, the fairies, and then you have this really personal, intimate story of almost like Romeo and Juliet, because it was, you know, the queen of the Goddess Clan and the demon king, and they didn't agree with their relationship, so they cursed them. It was very poetic, and that's something that 7 Deadly Sins did so well, is the way it handled the relationships and made it integral to the plot, that it's not just, oh, by the way, these two motherfuckers is fucking, like, there's more to it. But going back just a little bit, I know I'm all over the place, it is what it is. Going back to like the art and animation, yeah, season 3 and season 4, absolutely abysmal. It was bad. It was really bad. Like, you get a nice moment here or there, and I will say that when there's no action, when it's not intense, when it's just kind of very small scenes of like people talking and, you know, chilling out or going for a walk and stuff like that, art and animation is fine. Like, Studio Dean, they're good at animating just simple stuff. It's when it gets to the big battles that, you know, you gotta whip out Ufotable for these type of battles. You gotta whip out Studio Mappa for these type of battles, where it would completely fall devastatingly bad. I remember some of the stuff that really used to annoy me was even like the outlines of the characters. Like they would put like these weird colored tints of outline around the characters. Like you just have like a big green line around all of the characters. Like I remember when it was the helpers, like Zeldris' two helpers, or it was Zeldris and Meliodas' helpers when they fused or whatever. That whole fight, that whole battle, which was episodes upon episodes, they had like these weird colored outlines around them. I was like, what the fuck? Why are they just animated right? But again, when it would be simple scenes, it would look alright. Like there was a lot of times where I was like, okay, this is actually passable. This is acceptable when they're just not moving so much. Towards the end of the original story, when we went up against the Demon King, I ain't gonna lie, it got a little ridiculous at times. Like I thought it was a very interesting plot twist of like, oh shit, Meliodas is going into his evil ways. I mean, it was, you know, cliche. We've seen stuff like that before. But then when the plot twist is that no, the Demon King wanted his body all along, so he takes his body, and then they get rid of that catastrophe. And then when we find out, oh shit, he took Zeldris' body now, that shit was intense. I like that. I rocked with that. But then when it went into that the Demon King took over the land of Britannia, I was like, huh? Okay, now we're jumping shark, fam. Like, what are we doing here, fam? Take the L. That was one dude that could not accept it and take the L. And after a certain point, I was like, oh god, like get him away already. Get him out of here. What are we doing? Like, yo, we spent a decent amount of time with the Demon King, and to be honest with you, how much do we really know about him? It wasn't until the film, the last thing, that we actually got a little more insight into the Demon King and the Queen of the Goddess clan. Aside from that, it was just like, okay, that's Meliodas and Zeldris' father. Okay, he's a piece of shit. He's relentless in terms of wanting to come to the real world. We don't know like what makes him tick or anything like that, and he's just a piece of trash that, yeah, I don't know. He felt menacing to a certain degree, but not really. And his battle against Escanor was pretty dope as well. And just again, Escanor's send off with the Demon King himself, like, you know, the big threat, that was really dope. I love how Nakaba Suzuki wasn't afraid of making Escanor outshine even the main character Meliodas. Like, he truly meant it when he put 7 deadly sins. It wasn't like, oh, Meliodas in the 7 deadly sins where it's all about Meliodas, but the other guys, they have a moment here, they're like, Escanor sometimes would make Meliodas look small, you know, when he had the battle against him, when he went up against the Demon King and sacrificed his life energy in order to give that battle. Like, he looked dope. He looked like, shit, move over, Meliodas. Escanor's that guy. Jumping around, though, another thing that just crossed my mind, Estarossa, the plot twist that all along he was Mael, and it was something that Golder had switched everyone's memories. That was an interesting plot twist. That caught me off guard as well. I was like, oh, shit. I mean, I don't know how much it was foreshadowed in the manga, because, again, I'm sure some stuff was cut out, and it wasn't completely, like, it always felt a little weird for me, because I always saw the camaraderie, or not camaraderie, but I guess that there was a relationship of sorts between Meliodas and Zeldris, but Estarossa was just kind of like, I don't give a fuck, like, I don't know, a young Shikamaru or some shit. He didn't care about much, and then you start to get little inklings of like, oh, so he was jealous of Meliodas, and he was almost like a Meliodas clone. Things felt a little strange, and then once you find out, no, he was actually the Goddess clan all along, and yada yada, I was like, well played, Nakaba Suzuki. That, I remember, like, I was losing interest, and I was struggling to finish the final season of the 7 Deadly Sins, and then when that plot twist happened, I was like, I gotta finish this, okay? And the fact that Zeldris and Meliodas' relationship really had some dynamics and some development to it. It wasn't just like, oh, I hate you. Oh, you know, the fact that there was a betrayal that he felt with Meliodas leaving the Demon Clan, and we get into that, and towards the end it's like a complete 180 of a relationship where he's still like, you know, a Vegeta or mid Dragon Ball Z Vegeta, where Vegeta's like, I don't like you, I'll beat your ass, but you know, it is what it is. I guess we cool, some shit, or maybe late Z, somewhere around there. Like, that's the type of relationship that they have towards the end of the series, and I like that. Again, giving more context to these characters, that the 10 Commandments weren't just for play, like, they actually stood around and had a lot of value to them. Even towards the very end, almost, Derriere was still very important to things and making moves. Something that I was like, okay then. It was a plot twist, but it just felt like it was crammed in. I don't know if he needed to extend it because they needed more content for the anime. I don't know where this came from. A lot of me feels like it was a setup for, hey, we need something big that's going to stem and cross over and keep people engaged from 7 Deadly Sins going into 4 Nights of the Apocalypse. The ending villain threat, whatever you want to call it, with Merlin and Arthur. Like, yo, we just had this incredibly huge battle against the Demon King for episodes upon episodes, long ass stuff. Merlin was very loyal. We just had that burn mark that was placed on her face, and, you know, that very sad stuff with Escanor and all that jazz. And then Plot twist! She revives Arthur and puts chaos in him, and he's the king of chaos. I was just kind of like, where is this coming from? Why is this being crammed into like the last 3 or 4 episodes as if this is something grandioso that's supposed to happen? Yeah, it's gonna happen in another story that we're gonna be locked down to watch. Like, it was like almost like, nah, we don't want you to go. We're ending the original serialization, but you're gonna keep on watching this shit one way or another, fam, because now you interested. Now you want to know what's going on with Merlin and Arthur, huh? Which, keeping it a buck, Arthur was mad irrelevant for the longest time after his death and all that jazz. And then the cat, that was chaos too. That was a little weird. Like, I don't know, towards the end of Seven Deadly Sins, which that's original manga content, I can't just blame that on the anime, it got a little silly. It got a little bit like Nakaba Suzuki was just adding a bunch of stuff because probably they were breathing down his neck, like, you need to carry shit over to the next story. Like, who knows, maybe Seven Deadly Sins would have lasted a little bit longer, and all of that with chaos and everything would have been like the final arc and resolved everything. But again, it was like, man, can you just, you know, 4 Nights of the Apocalypse? Because I ain't gonna lie, I'm not really like threatened by Arthur and this chaos stuff. Like, I'm not. Like, Merlin, yeah, she's been threatening and menacing and stuff like that, but I don't know, I feel like, okay, I guess like in terms of for the next generation of characters, it's going to be a threat, but what the hell's happening with the Seven Deadly Sins to begin with? That's something that, god damn it, they got me. I'm actually really interested, because I actually did check out 4 Nights of the Apocalypse, but I'll have a whole other video at another time, my first impressions of the manga and what the hell is going on over there. But yeah, they got me, damn it, I'm interested. I don't know if I'm going to be watching the anime, though, I'll just say that, but we'll get to that in a second. Because the end of the anime, they did try to leave it so that if you are walking away from the Seven Deadly Sins, you're not going into those movies or the 4 Nights of the Apocalypse story or anything like that. They wrapped up a lot of things. You got King and Deanne's wedding. You got, you know, Meliodas and Elizabeth stood together. Zeldris and that vampire chick got together. Bon and Elaine got together. Elaine's problem is solved. She's alive again. Like, a lot of happy endings for the most part, except my boy Escanor, no. And I guess Golder, like, you know, he got his heart, so to speak, thinking, you know, like, Wizard of Oz, you know, he got his heart or whatever, so that kept on going as well. And of course, Merlin went off with Arthur, so it was like, it gave resolution the best it possibly could, so that if you, like, no, I'm not going on anymore, you could walk away from this, but at the same time, it still left, you know, a bunch of loose threads. And it was also kind of crazy at the end, you know, they all had kids, going into a Boruto thing, although, from what I've seen so far, the feel and vibe of 4 Nights of the Apocalypse, just a tease of my video whenever I make it, it doesn't seem very Boruto-esque at all, to be honest with you. In terms of a sequel spin-off, it feels a lot like Seven Deadly Sins early on, and that's a very good sign. But again, another video. Because we actually get to see that Meliodas and Elizabeth had a son, Tristan. We hear a few other characters had children, but they don't show them again. You gotta get to this fucking spin-off! And also, it was mad random that Hawk stood in purgatory with his brother. I was like, really? Really? Even though I think he returned for like some of the weddings or stuff like that. And now I gotta throw in this. Very big and important. If you watched the Seven Deadly Sins anime, you gave up on the manga, you said, let's just watch the anime and finish this shit off or whatever. For starters, I want to say you made a mistake. You should have stood manga only. Hands down. Hands down. Even if there was problems that there were also from the source material, this is a just read the manga, bro. Even though there's problems in the manga too, but still, just read the manga, bro. Because seasons 3 and 4 were, you know, just an abysmal dip in quality. I ain't gonna say that it's as bad as like a full-on CGI fest. I'll take seasons 3 and 4 over CGI any day of the week, but it just wasn't a matchup to seasons 1 and 2, and at times it was downright horrible looking. But if you are going to watch the anime, you're not going to read the manga, and you watch the anime, you don't know about it, you hands down have to finish off your experience with the Seven Deadly Sins anime right. And what I mean by that is, you got to watch the final movie. The final movie answers a lot of other questions that were left open, and also it's beautiful. In art and animation, it kind of went back to the early days of Seven Deadly Sins. The story felt like early Seven Deadly Sins. It just felt like they took the roots of the series, they went back to its roots with the quality, the story, and everything, and made it feel like Seven Deadly Sins again in all forms. And again, it's the final film. It's called Cursed by Light. It takes place, I want to say, 6 months after the end of the Holy Wars and the end of the story, but right before the big time skip that happens. And it basically is about the second Fairy King, and big plot twist, spoiler alert, I gotta tell you right now, just skip over this one little thing I'm about to tell you. The goddess Queen Elizabeth's mother. That's a big plot twist in the whole thing of she's actually the one that was kind of orchestrating things. Because that was one of the things that too, I was like, so the whole entire story, we're hearing about the Demon King and the Goddess Queen, and we handled the Demon King, but we didn't handle the goddess queen. Like, what's going on here? So I was very, very grateful that the Cursed by Light film actually went into it. And it answered a big question about the Demon King and the goddess queen, because again, we didn't know too much about them. We just knew that, hey, they were there. Hey, they made the curse and fucked up Elizabeth's life and Meliodas' life and made her immortal, even though at the end, thankfully, they broke that curse. But, you know, what's up with them? So we get a little bit more insight into that. Essentially, they were created by God knows what is out there. It's like the rabbit hole goes real deep, but essentially they were created to make the Holy Wars. The Holy Wars is essentially something to keep a balance. So them destroying the Holy War messed everything up, you know, the 7 deadly sins and whatnot. So that's what made her, you know, do what she does in this film, hiring the second fairy king and all of that jazz to carry things out, because again, we need war, we need conflict to keep things going. The demon and goddess are constructs essentially. And I found it very great for Elizabeth's character, because we've seen something with Elizabeth's character is we've seen her go from very scared, she was scared to death, to approach Meliodas about helping her early in the series, to going up and standing up against her mother, her birth mother, the queen of the goddess clan, and her actually saying, you ain't really my mom. My only parent was that king that adopted me and raised me. You ain't shit. That was a very defining moment for Elizabeth, and I loved it. And again, that's one of the reasons why you need to watch this film. You need to watch this film so you can see the development of Meliodas and Zeldris' relationship. You need to watch this film. You got a little glimpse into King and Deanne's wedding, even though I think they probably had to have a second one because it was kind of like interrupted. It added further clarification and setup for, again, the Four Knights of the Apocalypse, because you got the line with Merlin as she's there with Arthur saying, the era of the gods is over. Now begins the era of chaos, apocalypse, ha ha ha. And I love how it was a very simple thing of Meliodas and his brother, how the film ends, which is again kind of like the true ending in a way to the 7 deadly sins, of them just talking about repairing their relationship, and Meliodas offering or being asked by Zeldris to go help out repair Demon World, because of course there was a bunch of chaos from this film. And it was a nice simple moment. Like, this film had a lot of nice simple moments that remind me of early 7 deadly sins. And again, it was a beautiful visual way to leave off on this series after 2 seasons of horrendous And yeah, people, the 7 deadly sins, for better or worse, definitely something that I would still say in terms of as a shonen with a bunch of its own elements. Really dope stuff. Really wish it didn't go down the direction it did. I would recommend, if you did want to watch the anime, watch the first season. Maybe if you'd like, watch the second season. After that, straight up manga all day. I don't know if I'm going to cover the CGI film. I can't imagine myself wanting to watch those films, because it looks so bad. It looks like I don't know, a terribly graphics video game or some shit. So I'm not sure if I'm gonna go down that route. I will talk about Four Knights of the Apocalypse, and I will be reading the manga of that one. So I will give some form of 7 deadly sins videos. It's just the original story is over, and for what it's worth, it was great. It had a lot of potential. I feel like if they would have handled it properly, it could have been on the level of some of the big Shueisha titles even. But you know, it is what it is. And I'll never forget, man, Escanor, praise the sun, baby. One hell of a ride, and I'd still say it's worth it. Just a lot of problems, and stick to the black and white manga. But I'm very curious what you guys think. If you've experienced the 7 deadly sins, how did you feel about it? Did you watch the anime? Did you read the manga? Favorite characters? Best twist, worst twist, best stuff, worst stuff. What did you think about the final film? How do you feel going into the spin-off sequels? And your overall thoughts and expectations for what's next with this. Honestly, whenever Nakaba Suzuki wraps up the Four Knights of the Apocalypse, he's definitely an author to keep in mind for whatever's to come next with his works, because 7 Deadly Sins had so many great moments, man. Just a lot of them. It was just honestly business side of things, Netflix stepping in the picture, that made everything go haywire. But that's all I have for this one. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed. If you liked anything I had to say or enjoyed the video, drop me a like. I'd greatly appreciate it. And if you want more from me, make sure to subscribe. Follow me on Twitter, Instagram. Hit that bell to get all notifications. And if you want to follow any of my other social media, links are in the description below. I'm ForneverWorld, and as always, people, have an awesome day. And remember the golden rule: anime and manga for life, boy. Have an awesome day. Peace in. And one more final time, hoorah for the 7 Deadly Sins. One crazy ride. I can't believe it's almost 10 years that I've been on this series. Like, amazing. A lot of ups, a lot of downs. Either way, it was a journey, and thanks for all the great times. Meliodas and the crew, y'all really brought a lot of entertainment to my life. Have an awesome one.